very gentle little pop of the beer.
I was being gentle because this is...
Is that the splashy one?
Yeah, this is from Nott Hill.
Oh.
They fill it up
to the tippy.
It's almost like there's more beer in here than there's room for.
Oh no!
So
no!
Comes flying out.
Comes flying out. Well, I'm glad that it worked. Your method worked. We didn't have any splashing this time.
No, there was maybe just a tiny bit, but not much.
All right, fabulous. Well,
get the hang of it.
Speaking of beer, we both had a fabulous, lovely weekend, as we just shared. And on Friday night, I went out with one of our MFA friends, Megan Muldowney, for her birthday, which was last Sunday. So happy birthday, Megan. Yeah. Hey, Philip. Hey, Midnight. He's in.
He says, whoop, whoop.
Woo woo. Yeah, and we were at Yard House again, which is our new favorite place, and we had the half yards, the big crazy looking beer glasses.
Get a free one?
What's that?
She get one.
No, we should have said that. We didn't say that. No, we didn't. We told the waiter that it was her birthday too late. Oh, we should have said that. We should have said that. Oh, it would. Would she have gotten one? I don't know. We'll investigate next time. And that was lovely. I was out at the beach yesterday. It was a good time. And Chris, you were out. You went to a farm.
Went to Muscoot Farm.
Lovely in Somers.
New York. Yes, right. And saw some critters.
Nice.
There's some. They didn't have this, because of the COVID, you can't quite do as much as you used to. I can't go inside the barns and stuff.
Oh, no. It's not enough, like, ventilation or something?
I don't know. I guess so. But anyway, we saw some cows and horses and
nice
ducks and a couple of donkeys.
Oh.
Really into the donkeys. It looks like there's a pregnant donkey there. And
there's going to be baby donkeys soon.
I'm dying to see a baby donkey.
Oh.
Their gestation period is 11 to 14 months. Did you know that?
No. That is crazy. That's a crazy long time. It takes a long time to make a little donkey.
It does.
Yeah. Well, probably like how many donkeys?
I think you just get one.
Oh.
It's like a horse, it's just one.
Somebody Google that.
Yeah, pops out and then
another
get up.
15 months. Well, Marina Lindland is here. Hey, Marina, and she can't wait for this. She has her wine at the ready. Me too. I'm excited for this. We have an exciting night of readings tonight. This is such a wonderful and exciting FUMFA, tradition. The Fairfield Book Prize.
Right.
And we've got 2 nights of finalist readings. Tonight we have 3 finalists with us, including the winner. So we've got Victoria Buitron and Michael Belanger and Rebecca Dimyan. Dimyan. I'm sorry. I hope I pronounced it right.
That's right. And Victoria won the prize. Now, originally the prize was not going to be announced.
It wasn't going to be announced
July.
yet.
I have a theory about that. I can't remember who the judge was. We'll have to ask him and a reminder. But I have a theory that judge got all 5 of these books and tore through them.
Because they were all amazing.
Right, because they were all so riveting and good.
Yes.
It took no time at all. It took probably 5 days. Versus, it was going to be like months.
Yeah, months and months. That's so awesome. Yes. All right. Well, it is 8 o'clock, Chris, and it's time for our official welcome to this is FUMFA 53. 53. This is our Fairfield Book Prize finalist night, part one. And we have with us three finalists, Victoria Buitron, Michael Belanger, and Rebecca Dimyan. And we cannot wait to hear their readings from these amazing manuscripts. And of course, we will have our Q&A at 9 with all three of them. So as you're listening, please enjoy and save up your questions for around 9 o'clock. And, you know, grab your wine, grab a snack, grab your favorite beverage, whatever that is, kick back, get ready for these wonderful readings. Tell your friends. They can still jump in on Facebook or YouTube if they don't do Facebook. And of course, the video will also be archived, but you know, you're here now and please enjoy it live.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so that's what's happening tonight. Chris, can you tell everybody what is coming up soon?
Well, first thing that's coming up in the future is we're having a couple weeks off.
Vacation.
We won't be here next week, and we won't be here the following week, which that's Memorial Day weekend, that one. So we're taking those weeks off, and I don't know what you people will do with yourselves. I don't know what we
Sunday night.
But you know, don't forget us, and come back on June 6th, and we're going to have another finalist for the Fairfield Book Prize.
Yes.
Samantha Keller, and we're also going to have one of the big shots from Woodhall Press, Mr. Chris Madden.
Woo!
Right, he's one of the big shots over there, who also happens to be a wonderful writer, and he's going to share some of his work, and he's going to talk about the prize and how that whole thing works. And then down the line from there, we've got Julie Sarkisian, who's a wonderful writer and teacher, and Phil Ginsberg, who's
an amazing poet,
fabulous poet. And then we have Stephanie Dickinson, one of my favorite writers and favorite people, who's a great poet, fiction, nonfiction, memoir. She's also a publisher. And reading with her, and this is on Father's Day, is the one and only Sonia Huber. So what could go wrong? Everything's going to be fantastic.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be an amazing summer. So, you know, you have 2 weeks, take a break and miss us, you know, but then we'll be back with all of these incredible readings and also some really exciting group readings and a FUMFA open mic. And we are plotting a special reading with Midnight, Philip J. Curtis, and his group Put It Into Chat. So we need to, you know, we don't want to say too much before we have the details for you, but it's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing.
Cross-pollination.
Yeah. It's going to be great. Mom is here. Mom and Dad are here. Loda's here. Chris is here. Hey, Chris Madden.
There he is.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Well, Chris, I think we need to get back to our finalists. So once again, people who have come in, welcome to Fairfield Book Prize Finalist Night Part 1 with Victoria Buitron, Michael Belanger, and Rebecca Dimyan. And Chris, you're going to share with us Rebecca's bio. Oh, let's bring her up. Let's bring her up here.
Well, we talk about her.
Let's get her banner up here. Wait, I'll put the banner. Okay, sometimes we have like dueling banners. Okay.
Her smiling visage as I.
Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
So good to see you.
So good to see you too.
I'm sorry I mispronounced your last name.
No, don't worry about it. It's totally fine.
All right, go ahead, Chris.
I'm gonna talk about you now.
Okay.
So,
thanks for that.
I might throw in some stuff that I completely make up, but Rebecca Dimyan is known as one of the principal dancers of the New York City Ballet. Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong. Rebecca Dimyan. No, she's an award-winning writer whose nonfiction essays and short fiction have appeared in national and international publications, including Vox. How do you say that? Hugs and Kisses Jane, XO Jane, The Mighty, 34th Parallel, The Hunger, Glassworks Magazine, and many others. She's also a freelance contributor to Hearst, Connecticut Media. In addition to teaching at several colleges in Connecticut and working as a freelance editor, Rebecca is conference director of the Woodhall Press Writers Conference.
Amazing.
How about that? I've heard that. I heard rumors about this writers conference. We might have to talk about that with you and with Mr. Madden.
Yes.
So we're about to hear from your finalist manuscript. You take it away.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for the introduction, and thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to be here tonight. So I am going to be reading a little excerpt from my novel called Waiting for Beirut. I'm just going to I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm just going to kind of jump right in. But all you need to know is that it's set. The scene I'm reading is set in 1953 in Beirut, Lebanon. Okay, it's kind of like halfway through the book. Okay. A dark green cable car called a tramway, or as the Lebanese said in their distorted French way, tramway, chugged along Rue Weygand. The street was lined with pale, stone-faced buildings and awning-hooded sidewalks, home to bins of produce and street vendors hawking brightly colored scarves. Others peddled statues of the Blessed Mother and crucifixes, cheap bracelets, freshly made sage with hummus, shawarma, and other Middle Eastern delicacies. I walked along the sidewalk, brushing past porters waiting for work who sought relief from the beating sun under blonde, hand-woven baskets. From the wicker sanctuaries, the sleeping porters' legs protruded, their worn shoes coated in dust, inches from the glistening footwear of businessmen. A middle-aged Muslim woman selling her designs caught my attention. A deep purple scarf called out to me from her display. The color was reminiscent of the long, curling eggplant skins that would litter the counter as Emmy and I made baba ganoush together. As I decided to purchase the scarf as a gift for my mother, I nearly collided with a man crouched low over a cache of old books. Asif, I explained, sorry. The man stood up and laughed. In English, laced with an accent that was not quite Levantian, perhaps Greek, he said, "How American of you to apologize to me, though I was the one blocking your way." Full, fleshy lips curled upwards into a smile. Rebellious black curls fell loose, framing a tanned, roguish face. A dark goatee gave him a refined air, but it was his eyes that struck me. They were blue-gray, the color of the sky in winter. I almost didn't notice that he stood with the help of a cane. He seemed to be around my age, perhaps older, late 20s. I couldn't remember how to be clever, so I settled for smiling and extending my hand. George Lahoud. Andros Salakos. Somewhere in the distance, Marker Place sounds crashed against the Weygand like the Mediterranean waves outside St. George's Hotel. George Lahoud? Lebanese American, then. I nodded. Salakos? Only Greeks have that many vowels in their names. He laughed, revealing a set of perfectly white teeth. You have good taste. The book in his hand familiar, the almost ethereal portrait of the author staring from the cover. I couldn't call myself an artist if I didn't adore Gibran. Andros leaned heavily on his cane, the copy of The Prophet clutched in his other hand. You're a local artist? A student at American University. Sorry, I went too far. The stranger dug his gaze into me. The rapid beat of the Muslim woman's Arabic filled the space around us as she tried to convince an elderly gentleman in a turban and a suit to purchase one of her scarves. He offered nothing further. Tucking the book under his arm, he continued to peruse the makeshift shelves, pulling an incarnadine leather-bound book with an Arabic inscription from its place. I wondered what the title translated to in English. While I could speak fluently, I couldn't read or write the language. I'm visiting family in Beirut. For some reason, I didn't want to share that I was on my honeymoon. I also didn't want to walk away. He smiled politely, hardly looking up from the new book in his hand. The moments that comprised an acceptable, casual exchange were almost spent, but my eyes begged to linger just a moment longer. I've heard AUB's campus is something to see. Sorry. Andros began walking in a stilted way toward the merchant. It is. I stood with the eggplant scarf in my hand. I silently pleaded with him, this Greek stranger, to say more, to encourage more. I lowered the scarf to conceal the visceral imploring that grew below. Perhaps I felt emboldened by this new environment. I was in Lebanon. Here, I was not George, the Georgetown dropout, George, the butcher, George, the son of George Sr. Here, in the souk on Rue Gand, amid Middle Eastern delicacies and bric-a-brac, I was just a man intrigued by a stranger. Sorry. It's difficult reading from the computer. I should have printed out my pages. I apologize. Andros handed money to the woman and turned to leave the stand to resume his place among the foreign mass bustling in the marketplace. But a second before becoming just another inconsequential encounter, he turned towards me. I can give you a tour sometime. 3 o'clock? Eleanor was not amenable to continuing her day solo. I don't understand why I can't come with you. I want to see Hamara too. My wife sat on the edge of the bed, having just finished painting her nails red. A navy blue dress clung to her curvaceous frame. We had returned to our hotel around lunch to freshen up and relax before late afternoon activities. In a fresh Oxford shirt and slacks, I wrapped a checkered keffiyeh around my neck and put on a new pair of sunglasses. I ran fingers through my pomaded hair, parting it to the side. You'll be bored. I want to spend time in the library on AUB's campus. I thought back to the premature end of my collegiate career at Georgetown. I would have graduated last May. I'd be in medical school now, probably living in DC. And what, I don't like books? Eleanor held up her hand. Her left hand curled her fingers and brought them to her lips, where she gently blew on the fresh coat of lacquer. It's not what I'm saying, my love. She dabbed at her thumbnail with her right pointer finger, testing the durability of the paint. Apparently satisfied, she reached into her purse on the bedside table, pulled out her gold tube of lipstick, and painted her lips a shade of pink. She blotted them with a tissue from the dresser. The gold bracelets on her wrists jangled like an off-key song. What's so special about this campus anyway? She appraised herself in the mirror before walking towards the door. I'm sure it looks like any college. Don't be dense. That's like saying every dress looks the same because it's qualified as a dress. Do whatever you want. I could feel my heart overreacting in rapid beats as I moved in front of her and almost ran to the elevator. Eleanor, right on my heels, shouted so the elderly British couple in the room next to us could most likely hear, "Are you suggesting that I go out into Beirut all on my own, a young woman by herself in a strange city? What kind of husband are you, George?" She stopped and folded her arms as I entered the elevator. The elevator operator, a young tan boy in a white uniform, asked, "The lobby, sir?" Before the gilded door shut, I looked directly into my wife's round face and said, "You'll find something to do." My tone was sharper than I intended, and I could see it cut her deeply enough to wound. Her eyes became pools deep enough to swim in. Andrews Soulakos, my Greek stranger, leaned against the pale stone of the main entrance to the campus on Rue Bliss and Hamara. A cigarette in one hand and walking stick in the other, he was well dressed in a pressed-collared shirt and slacks. As I approached him, I noticed he was not wearing socks with his loafers, and the top 2 buttons of his shirt were unfastened, revealing an explosion of fine black chest hair. "Kifik," I managed to articulate, difficult because of a sudden dryness in my throat. "How are you?" The Greek stranger answered with a smile. Without a word, he tossed the cigarette and started walking in a stunted way through the wrought iron gate. I followed, appreciating the light limestone face of the entrance. The other side of the gate opened into a green oasis, a hill overlooking the vast expanse of Mediterranean Sea which surrounded the campus. Limestone buildings and sweeping palm trees filled the pastoral setting as feral cats scampered across walkways like the squirrels in Connecticut. I looked back at the entrance, just beyond which cars and people hurried by, relics of a distant metropolis. The words, a verse from the Bible, that they may have life and have it more abundantly, was etched on either side of the gate, one side in Arabic, the other in English. Turning around, I saw Andros had not waited for me, but had continued moving in the direction of the sea. I caught up to the surprisingly quick man and waited in vain for him to begin some kind of tour. Instead, he continued and paused only to light a cigarette. "Want one?" Andros handed me the one he'd just lit and took another for himself. I took the cigarette and put it in my mouth, acutely aware of its recent placement between his lips. "Thanks." Andros resumed walking. The sound of his cane against the walkway matched the beating in my chest, steady palpitations. Distant city sounds and the laughter and chatter of students coalesced in sweet Mediterranean air. A few men on bicycles rode past us. They wore sports jackets and sweater vests with shorts and laughed as they sped by. One of the men wore a brimless rounded cap called a kufi, emblematic of his Islamic religion. We made our way to an elegant building of reinforced concrete faced with dusky white limestone. We proceeded into the Japhet Memorial Library and a capacious entrance hall paneled with the same polished stone of the exterior. Andros moved like dust, fleeting unnoticed by the students walking in groups and speaking in hushed voices throughout the oak-paneled central hall. The smell of old books grounded me, took me back to my 2 years at Georgetown. We moved beyond the main desk and past a bust of Nami Japhet. The sculpture immortalized the well-known businessman and scholar's largesse and explicated the eponymous building, which had been dedicated only a few months earlier. I took a moment to appreciate the marble floors before I realized Andros was already making his way up a flight of polished limestone steps. I caught up to him just as he reached for a doorway at the end of the third floor. He opened the door to a rooftop terrace. Now see your Lebanon. Beyond the crown of a palm tree, sun-blanched mountains, limestone buildings, an infinite sea unfurled below us. Palms and cedars and olive trees, among other flora, decorated the view. The white face of the sun smiled on the beautiful country below it, and just as beautiful, just as moving, a stubble-framed smile barely removed from the brightness of the Mediterranean sun. I couldn't remember any other particular sites that I had wanted to visit on AUB's campus. In those moments, it seemed to me that nothing in all of Lebanon could be a more worthwhile sight than this terrace view. Andros leaned against the doorway, smoking another cigarette. His arms folded across his chest, he seemed neither rushed nor relaxed. He watched me from the shade of the door. I pretended to admire the city below. The air smelled of salt. Beautiful, isn't it, George? I knew he was referring to the view, but I couldn't help but apply the comment to the way he said my name. I always thought of it as a rough-sounding name, filling the mouth like coarse sandpaper. But the way Andros said George was soft, almost like silk sliding off his tongue. We returned in silence to the main gate on Rue Bliss. Are you thirsty? An excuse to remain in his company. I could drink. Any cafes close by? We're on a university campus. I could feel a film of perspiration christen my brow. Andros walked out of the gate, turning after a moment to be sure I was following. There's a place a few blocks away. He crossed the street, weaved among the traffic. Arabic songs sneaked in between static on car radios. The city sounds pricked like whispers. I walked as close to Andros as social decorum permitted, feeling the waves of summer between us as his fingers teased mine. I pulled my hand away and dug it into my pocket. He continued to limp beside me, seemingly unfazed by the rejection. We didn't speak, but we made our way down a narrow cobblestone street, at the end of which was a large limestone restaurant with outdoor tables and chairs scattered like the pigeons around them, where the street ended and the dining area began. A web of flowering green and purple clematis covered the uppermost part of the small building. We passed under an arch of bougainvillea blushing pink. We were seated at a corner table. Andros ordered a glass of arat. I followed his lead. The space between sips was filled by my imagination. I thought of him smoking cigarettes at a kitchen table, reading the morning paper while a lovely raven-haired woman served him breakfast in a ruffled apron and heels. I pictured him alone in a kitschy studio, unleashing his soul upon a submissive canvas. I saw him at day's end, skin crusted with dried pastel paints and expired sweat, hair damp but still reckless, stretching his sore leg as he sat on the edge of his bed, cane resting against the good appendage. I wondered what it must feel like to be the cane brushing against his leg. Sitting at the tiled table, allowing gin heat to swell in my gut as I drank copiously at first and second glass of liquor, I noticed his belly spilled just so over the constraint of his belt, a perfectly sculpted body, but a stomach soft and rounded, incongruous, inconsistent, intriguing, like a woman's, like my wife's. In that moment, I longed to experience the softness of his belly. The air was thick with the nearby sea. The conversation between us was nothing more than disconnected words dangling in the atmosphere. Andros' gaze was thick with arat, his eyes cloudy, reluctant to meet mine. Those eyes, his eyes, were the sea I could fall into and drown. We were separated by a table filled with half-eaten relics, plates smudged with baba ganoush and hummus, green olives and pita bread, ashtrays heaped in a growing mound of black-gray ash. After another round, or maybe two, our eyes finally ran into each other at the center of the table and lingered. In that moment, completely and all at once, I was overwhelmed. He was like the city of Beirut to me, elusive, enigmatic, broken, but full of infinite possibility and suggestion. And the veins of the city flowed with misfits and gods, spurious intentions, and the most profound authenticity. It was familiar. It was strange. It was a memory and a dream. It was real. It was fantasy. I had been waiting for Beirut all my life, waiting to visit my parents' country, my country. And here it was, sitting across the table, chain smoking and swigging licorice-flavored liqueur. People will think we're together, he said, his tone slippery, smooth like the liqueur. I turned my thoughts to Eleanor, imagined what it would be like to leave her, what it would be like to spend afternoons with this Greek stranger, sharing drinks like secrets. A tall, dark-haired waiter came over with another round. The new glass was cold in my hand. It made me realize holding on to this afternoon would be like holding on to water. I didn't say anything, just looked. I wanted to jump into the blue-gray water of his eyes, let it drip in rivulets down my skin. I should have turned my eyes away, sought refuge in the glass bowl of hummus between us on the table, neutral territory. But I gave into transgression and they lingered, taking in the strength and conviction of his gaze. Heavy black lashes fanned from the lids. A small, round mole christened the corner of his left eye, a starting point on a map, a suggestion. Begin your adventure here. Minutes passed in beads of condensation forming on our glasses. I savored the cool moisture as it ran down my fingers. A softer, unrecognizable version of my voice broke the atmosphere with a question. So what's your story? My story? I don't know. It's still being written. He smiled. I noticed I was chewing the corner of my lower lip. Tell me the beginning. How did it start? Like most stories do, I suppose. It starts with a boy. He grows into a man. The man wants things that most people want: contentment, success, love. Andrew stopped speaking to put a cigarette in his mouth. With a gold lighter, he lit it and sucked in. He exhaled. Mostly he wants one great love, the kind of love poetry and novels and songs are written about. He leaned back in the chair. Your story doesn't have that yet? I took a sip of my lukewarm drink. It seems the plot line is moving in that direction. A new character has been introduced in the most recent chapter. He looked off into the distance. The sunlight lit his features, but a mysterious darkness persisted behind his gaze. I wanted to inhale the edges of his face, to trace every secret, every detail of his life written in the lines of his skin. I ached to belong to the parting of his lips, a place I imagined could feel like home. And what's his character like? My skin crawled in unfamiliar ways. He looked across the street and continued smoking. A couple of older, gray-haired men stood smoking cigarettes in a doorway. He seemed to regard them with casual interest. He's a stranger, lost, I think. Lost? Yes. He offered nothing further in the way of an explanation. He just sat smoking, watching, drifting. I picked up my glass, swagged and placed it too loudly back on the table. And? His gaze returned to mine and he smiled. Sometimes you must get lost to find yourself. He leaned back further in the chair and turned his face skyward, letting the sunlight dance across the tanned bridge of his nose. His eyes were closed as if he was alone or simply in a somnambulous state. Perhaps this was all just a dream. That's it. Sorry, I cut it off there.
Oh my God, Rebecca. Chris, were you not like totally captivated? Romance.
That's quite a honeymoon that this guy's on. Wow.
God.
Sorry, my mouth was all. Sorry if I was a little awkward reading.
You were amazing.
Oh.
Sorry.
I was in this story. I was there. I was smelling it. I was feeling it. I was tasting it. It was so gorgeous. Such luscious imagery, and such intrigue. Oh my God, you'll have to read the comments later. Oh my God, Chris, I mean, amazing.
Right?
Amazing. Right? Amazing. I want this in a book in my hand right now.
Thank you.
I was getting hungry too. I was like, give me some baba ganoush before
some hummus. Yes.
We're going to talk about this later, obviously, but
for sure. Yes. Save your questions, or you could throw them in the chat now if you think you'll forget. But right. Yeah, we'll see you again in the Q&A, Rebecca. Just so incredible.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Yes, of course. All right, Chris. Well, it's time for us to bring up our next finalist. This night's going to be, it's going to be overwhelming. I mean, we always have incredible readers on, with their incredible pieces, but, I'm already blown away. I'm just, as I expect it to be. But let's introduce our next amazing finalist. Let's bring him up. Michael Belanger.
Bravo.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. I'm going to share with you Michael's bio. Michael Belanger is the author of the young adult novel, The History of Jane Doe, and a proud graduate of Fairfield University's MFA program. Woo! When he's not writing, he teaches history at Greenwich High School, where he is also a faculty advisor to Greenwich, a literary magazine that has published talented young writers, including Truman Capote, for over 100 years. He currently lives in Connecticut, and you can purchase his book at the link on our Facebook page, which is featured with the really big image with everyone on it for tonight. And there are just so many other wonderful details of wonderful things happening, but we'll leave that to you to share. Michael, welcome. We can't wait to hear you read.
Cool. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Chris. I actually workshopped a good amount of this novel in Chris's workshop, so I owe Chris a lot of thanks. And thank you, Rebecca, for that amazing scene. I'm looking forward to hearing Victoria's as well. So I'm just going to give you a little background on the novel, and then I'll just read a little bit. So the novel is called Thus Spoke Fred Norwood. It's about a high school teacher and young adult author, so I didn't have to, do a big stretch there. And his name is Walter Curcio. After his YA novel, The Sadness of Levon Wyatt, is universally panned and a commercial flop, he finds himself facing a terrible case of writer's block. If that wasn't bad enough, his college roommate and old writing buddy, Wilson T. Whitfield, hit the New York Times bestseller list with a novel about a man and his talking dog. Filled with resentment and jealousy, Walt struggles to find inspiration. After he receives a strange email from a teenage fan under the pseudonym Fred Nietzsche, Walt sees a chance to grab some publicity. Only Fred's not like most kids, not only because of his apparent love of existentialist philosophy, but Walt does a little research and learns that Fred's a childhood cancer survivor and has led quite a celebrity-filled life on his many Make-A-Wish conquests. So the stage is set for a showdown when Walt visits Fred's school. It's a private school named Roger Sherman Academy, and his best friend and colleague named Kaz, pretending to be Walt's publicist with a ridiculous and unfulfilled list of requests, and the newspaper reporter Lee, with whom Kaz is hoping to snag a date with. And Walt's prepared a presentation based on the hero's journey, but first he has to meet Fred. And that's the scene I'm going to read to you guys right now. The principal greeted us at the visitor's desk. He was an exceedingly tall man with a wiry neck. His head seemed to wobble back and forth, as if a quick turn would send it toppling over. Bushy gray hair with a vast bald patch in the middle gave him the appearance of a plant in the process of sprouting. He wore a threadbare brown tweed jacket with elbow patches and black rubber-soled shoes that screamed thrift and comfort. "I'm Principal Stevens," he said in a 1950s drawl. "Walt," I said. He shook my hand warmly, gently enclosing it with his other, and did the same to Lee and Kaz. "We're thrilled to have you all here," he said. "Thrilled to be here. We bought one of your books for our library." "Just one?" I realized too late that I said it out loud. Principal Stevens cleared his throat. Budget cuts, he responded politely. The red light on Lee's tape recorder blinked, warning me to watch my words. I had already faltered and revealed my true character as a greedy, self-obsessed author who only cared about book sales. Principal Stevens began walking through the hallway, motioning for us to follow. He weaved in between groups of students, saying things like, "Way to go on that chemistry test," and "Great hit last night." Students waved as he passed, the subdued deference given to a minor celebrity. "I suppose you'd like to meet Mr. Norwood," Principal Stevens said, glancing over his shoulder as we entered the main office. "The one who made today possible?" I nodded. "Definitely." We stopped in front of a chest-high counter. An abandoned chair sat on the other side, meaning my visit hadn't generated any buzz among the office staff. Kaz heaved the box of books on top and slapped it as if hitting the roof of a car. Near the back of the main office, a door creaked open, revealing a shadow on the other side, sinister and still. An old plaque that read "Principal" had been hammered into the door, no doubt a souvenir from the original Roger Sherman Academy. "Just sign in here," Principal Stevens said, pointing to an empty piece of paper. I scrawled my signature, making sure it had enough loops to prove my legitimacy as an author. I also wanted to prepare for the book signing. "Fred," Principal Stevens called to his office. The shadow lengthened. I gulped. I hadn't prepared myself. I worked with teenagers every day, but this felt too public and too personal all at the same time. "Fred," Principal Stevens' voice rose. He wrinkled his forehead. "Fred's a little..." But before he could finish his sentence, the door burst open, and a boy emerged from the office holding a bagel in one hand, a croissant in the other. He wore a sheepish smile on his face, as if we were all characters in a joke he'd begun to tell. 3 people walk into a school. I don't know what I'd pictured when I received the first strange email from Fred Nietzsche, but he didn't quite fit the bill. He didn't really fit any bill. He had a mop of curly brown hair and the beginnings of a mustache faintly dusting his upper lip. He'd lost the innocence from the original photo I'd seen, and in its place, I noticed a sense of removal, of watching the world on a TV screen. The baby fat in his face had disappeared, and his cheeks looked hollow, somewhere between a skeleton and a wax sculpture. Though Roger Sherman Academy was a private school, there was evidently no uniform, as he looked like he just rolled out of bed in sneakers, mesh shorts, and a t-shirt with a face I recognized as Albert Camus, his collar popped, cigarette dangling from his mouth. "Hi, Fred," I said, putting on my enthusiastic teacher voice. He held up his hands, each filled with a pastry, and shrugged. He placed the croissant in his mouth and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you," I said. We shook. He mumbled something through his croissant and brought his hand back to his mouth and ripped it from his teeth. "Thank you so much for your email," I added. Lee slipped her tape recorder out of her bag and once again began recording. "Come into my office," Principal Stevens said. "I have a little breakfast for you, as requested by your publicist." Kaz winked at me. Principal Stevens glared at Fred. Apparently, Fred's already helped himself. "I thought it was in my honor," Fred said. I smiled. Fred and I made eye contact, and something in his eyes scared me. A vacantness, a slight disconnect from reality, or maybe resignation. In the moment, I couldn't quite tell. Principal Stevens' office may as well have been decorated by a high schooler. Instead of plaques honoring his achievements as a principal, he packed it full of sports memorabilia. A blue flag featuring the Academy mascot, the Compromises, symbolized by a dour-looking portrait of Roger Sherman, stretched along the wall. A baseball bat hung over the desk like a sword. A basketball in a glass case sat on top of an almost barren bookshelf beside a hefty volume entitled A History of Roger Sherman Academy. Principal Stevens motioned to a meager buffet on a desk. It contained some fruit, a carton of orange juice, and a plate of pastries. "Please help yourself. I have to go make some rounds before the day begins, but I figured this would be a good chance for you all to get better acquainted with Fred. If you need anything, my assistant David should be back any minute." With that, Principal Stevens disappeared. After dropping the box of books on the floor by a faded leather couch that resembled a small boat, Kaz wandered over to the food. "These are some good-looking pastries," he said. "Can I get you something?" he asked Lee. "Already ate." Her eyes focused on Fred. "What got you interested in having Walter Curcio come speak, Fred?" Fred took a bite of his bagel, once again voraciously ripping off a piece. He glanced at me, smiled slightly. I mean, it's Walter frickin' Curcio, for God's sake. Lee smiled, not the soundbite she was hoping for. What does he mean to you? He means no class for the day, Fred said. We all stared at him. My palms suddenly felt drenched as a single bead of sweat trickled down my back. Kidding, I'm kidding. He means everything. Okay, that's a little too far. I'm not a stalker or anything, unless you want to take that angle for the story. He dusted his hands off, crumbs falling to the floor. Look, I liked his book. That's all there is to it. And to have an author come speak at your school is just the tits. Sorry, I didn't mean to say tits. He blushed, but he didn't look away. I took a deep breath. Just my luck that my only fan would be as socially inept as me. Tits? Kaz mouthed. What the fuck? I shrugged. I strode over the pastry table and grabbed a croissant. I shoved half of it in my mouth, practically choking. As I chewed, I realized it was stale. So much for Roger Sherman Academy rolling out the red carpet. I scanned the office looking for my bag of peanut M&Ms and my gift bag, the only other demands from my publicist, my fake publicist. I looked to Kaz, trying to telepathically convey my dissatisfaction, but his eyes remained on Lee. Lee turned to me. What about you? I wiped the flakes off my face, swallowed. How does it feel to be connecting with a fan? Fred scrutinized me, squinting through his mop of hair. Once again, I got the feeling that I'd entered a joke with no punchline in sight. Well, it's kids like Fred that inspired me to write for a young adult audience. If my book makes a small difference for someone going through a challenging time, it's all worth it. I mean, even if his book only impacted one person, Fred said, it doesn't make it any less of an amazing book. Kaz's eyes bulged out of his head. What the hell? Kaz caught himself. Time is it? Better get ready for the presentation. What impact did it have on you, Fred? Lee asked, still plumbing the depths for a soundbite. I waited expectantly, hoping she could draw a story out of him, a fluff piece that would look good in the Greenfield Advertiser. I already had a terrible feeling churning in my stomach, not so much nausea, but revulsion at the thought skulking around the back of my mind. I hate this kid. Never a good thing to hate a teenager, especially one who'd recovered from a terminal illness. But if he'd recovered, then it wasn't terminal, so maybe my hatred was still morally sound. That's a tough question, Fred said. His voice dropped to a lower register, a solemn quality to it, cutting through the surface of small talk. I could have sworn he sniffled for dramatic effect. Here comes the story about the childhood illness, I thought. Just like Levon, Fred began, I know what it's like to love someone struggling with depression. I could feel the emotion in his voice, the words clipped, like an orchestra being played through a boombox. Maybe I judged Fred a little too harshly. And now that John's no longer around, Fred continued, I keep thinking I should have done more. Not only did Fred have cancer, he also lost a friend to suicide. He was mixing up YA plot lines, or his life had become a mishmash of tragic YA novels. Kaz chomped loudly into his bagel. The three of us stared at this scraggly-haired teenager. I felt like a jerk. Life had dealt him a tough hand, and here he was doing his damnedest to carry on. I glanced at his t-shirt and made eye contact with Camus. I remembered Camus' essay on the absurd from a seminar I took in college, all about how humankind's search for meaning will always come up short. So much pain inflicted in that space between reason and the desire to know why. What was Camus' solution? I couldn't quite remember at the moment. What happened to your friend? Lee asked hesitantly. Fred wiped his eyes on his t-shirt sleeve with a flapping motion. He swam right into the filter. I know some people don't think goldfish have feelings, but I just know he killed himself. He just wasn't happy in his tank, and I should have known. Silence. Lee glanced at me, a look that said plain as day, this kid's fucking crazy. Fred's laughter cracked the silence, a jarring crescendo of throaty cackles. Holy shit, you should have seen all your faces. Boy, did I have you all going. He dabbed at his eyes with the bottom of his t-shirt, momentarily revealing his pale stomach and a long faded pink scar that railroaded above the waistline of his shorts. I couldn't help but shudder. The mark of Fred's cancer. A reminder to give this kid a break. But the story's true, Fred continued. One morning, I found John Stuart Gill caught in the filter. Ironic that his last act would be to spread sadness. Well, I don't think that's funny, Lee said. My friend committed suicide back in high school. Sorry, Fred said. Sometimes I make jokes when I'm nervous. At least that's what the school social worker says. Back in the ward, all we had were jokes. The second you stopped laughing is the moment you started dying. Lee looked shocked by Fred's honesty. No, I'm sorry, Lee said. You didn't do anything wrong. I could have sworn Fred winked at me. I kept thinking about his scar, the pink and jagged skin crawling across his stomach. Without warning, Fred took a running start toward the couch and parachuted onto the cushions, the leather heaving under his weight. I've always wanted to do that, he said mischievously. I just had to wait for Principal Stevens to leave the room. He said the last part impersonating the 1950s drawl of Principal Stevens, a man who'd clearly grown up watching Jimmy Stewart. Lee looked nervously to Kaz and me. Do you want a signed book, Fred? Kaz asked, once again claiming the role of my publicist. Fred stretched out his legs and placed his sneakers on the cushions, as if preparing to bare his soul to a therapist. Sure, why not? Kaz handed me a book and I numbly opened it. Lee passed me a pen and I squiggled my signature. At this point, Principal Stevens returned, flanked by a man who appeared to be an amateur bodybuilder. Fred abruptly sat up. David? Lee asked. Lily? Lee blushed. What are you? They spoke over one another, stopped at the same time, smiled. It looked as if they'd rehearsed the scene hundreds of times before. I can't believe I didn't tell you, David said. I'm going back to school to be a teacher, and I wanted to get some experience working in a school. You two know each other? Kaz asked. We used to... David's voice trailed off. God, it's so great to see you. You too. You look... David smiled, and just like that, it felt like Kaz and I had intruded on someone else's book. Once again, the two of us perpetual observers, doomed to watch the story arcs crisscross while we remained frozen in place. After we broke up, I really got into bodybuilding, David said. Wow, Lee said, seeming to forget she was technically on the clock. Just wow. Can I walk you down to the auditorium? David asked. And perhaps we can stop by the trophy case, Principal Stevens said, clearly seeing an opening for some good press. I don't know if you're aware, but I've won Private School Principal of the Year 5 years in a row. Lee and David left, trailed by a bumbling Principal Stevens, who gave off the distinct vibe of a Great Dane being taken for a walk. Only Kaz and I remained, left alone with Fred. This day's turning into a real shit show, Kaz whispered. What did I do to deserve this? He tilted his head up at the ceiling and shook his fist. Fred sprang off the couch and helped himself to another croissant. God is dead, he mumbled through a mouthful of pastry, the words blunted and dulled, giving off the vibe of a tired and disgruntled prophet, fed up with no one listening to him. With that, he left the room, snatching yet another pastry on his way out. Your fans suck, Cass said. Fan, I corrected. My fan sucks. Next chapter. The auditorium was half empty by the time 9 o'clock rolled around. Principal Stevens seemed somewhat embarrassed by this, offering excuses with the accusatory tone I'd grown used to hearing from my lightly attended book signings. A lot of classes testing today, he told me backstage beside a rolling mural of a stone castle and orange moon, a requisite for all high school theater productions. If we had more notice, to be honest, I felt relieved. After meeting Fred, the day had begun to feel like a big mistake. I waited in the wings, anxious to close the chapter on this failed experiment. Kaz sat stage left in the front row next to Lee, who looked like she'd forgotten her assignment. She swiveled away from Kaz as she laughed with David, her ex-boyfriend turned bodybuilder. Fred sat alone, dead center in the front row. He stared down at his cell phone, a vacant expression on his face, the look of a loner trying to disappear. Something about seeing him flanked by a sea of empty seats made me feel guilty. I remembered his initial email, the barrage of PSs, his words echoing into the digital void of the internet. Kids like Fred needed teachers the most, yet I'd responded with contempt, plugging my ears to escape the screams of his suffering, which just happened to take the form of absurd punchlines and petty insults. My hatred dissolved into an amorphous feeling of unease about my intentions for the school visit, anxiety over the presentation, and guilt surrounding my callous response to Fred. I resolved to be nicer after the assembly. Tell him if he needed me, I'd be there. Hopefully Lee would catch it, but if not, no big deal. I'd be the mentor every kid like Fred needed. If he ever wanted to alert the press about my selfless act, how I helped him find his way out of depression, gave him a flashlight to navigate the dark corridors of his mind, so be it. If not, then I'd write it off as community service. Wish me luck, Principal Stevens said as he walked on stage to a roar of applause. He waved to the audience like a gladiator making his appearance at the Coliseum. That's when it hit me. We all lived in our own novels, each moment packed with tension, conflict, and tests for the protagonists. Principal Stevens stopped in front of the podium and lowered his head to the microphone. The spotlight illuminated his bald patch, a mohawk in reverse. Students, reporters, distinguished guests from the board. Principal Stevens paused and nodded toward an elderly woman a few seats behind Kaz, her chin resting on her chest. I hadn't even begun the presentation, and already I had a sleeping audience member. We're honored to have with us a homegrown author and teacher. He wrote a book. And what can I say about this book? He held up a copy of Leave on Wyatt and fanned through the pages. It's about 273 pages. It contains words and sentences, and those words and sentences form a story. Without further ado, he said in the voice of a sports announcer, please welcome Walter Curcio. A smattering of applause greeted me, a pale echo of the thunderous uproar that accompanied Principal Stevens' entrance. My shoes squeaked on the stage as I walked to the podium. I just had to get through the first 5 minutes. After that, I'd find my rhythm and everything would be okay. Hello, Roger Sherman Academy, I shouted, trying to rally enthusiasm through sheer volume. How is everyone doing today? Feedback squealed from the speakers. A yearbook collage of blank faces stared back at me. I'd like to talk to you today about finding your voice as writers and teenagers. I glanced down at the front row, glimpsed Fred still on his phone. My body tensed with all the rage and hatred I'd been trying to suppress. Teachers are not saints. A kid on a cell phone is the middle finger of the modern age. More subtle, perhaps, but no less devastating. Taken in conjunction with the other slights of the day, buying one book for the library, the missing bag of M&Ms, and the sparsely attended assembly, I couldn't help but feel like the butt of a cosmic joke. But I didn't lash out and harangue Fred and Principal Stevens with a litany of my grievances as a visiting author. I shrugged off the proverbial writer's blazer in favor of my teacher's cardigan and did what I've been doing for the last 10 years. What I had no choice but to do after countless classes standing steadfast in the tidal wave of student boredom. I took a deep breath and clicked on, moving from my introduction slide, Welcome Writers, to the slide entitled Ordinary World, where I described life before meeting Wilson, who I referred to in the presentation as the anonymous roommate. But through each of the slides, I couldn't ignore Fred on his cell phone, Lee and David chatting it up, and the dozens of faces staring down at their laps, a look of glazed boredom in their eyes. By the time I clicked to the slide called Return with the Elixir, all about finding amateur agent Harvey Henderson to represent me, a buzzer noise rumbled through the speakers, followed by an awkward laugh from Principal Stevens. I glanced backstage. Principal Stevens stood as high as the painted castle, reminding me of a giant in a fairy tale. I noticed a portable mic clutched between his hands. I just have one more slide, I mumbled off mic. My crescendo, where I spoke about the dangers of depression and my purely altruistic reasons for writing the book, the soundbite I wanted in the paper. Let's give Mr. Curcio a big compromise round of applause, Principal Stevens answered, the spotlight following him as he triumphantly appeared on stage. We have just enough time for a couple of questions. To my surprise, Fred sprang up almost immediately. And that's where I'll stop.
Oh my God, Michael. So funny. So much fun. So vivid. What, say it, Chris? Say again. Sorry, I'm so loud.
That was just the tits, is what I was saying.
It was just the tits. That was incredible. That was so much fun. I'm in this scene. So many like little quotable, hilarious moments. Like, this being on your cell phone is the middle finger of the model age. I'm like, yes. Oh my God. Just such incredible description. I want to know what Fred is going to say. I got to know. And just like Rebecca's manuscript, like I want this in my hand and I want more right now.
Thank you.
So good. Well,
that
and
was great, Mike.
Thanks.
Yeah. And of course, later you need to go on Facebook and YouTube and see all of the love and all of the comments, everybody laughing and having a great time listening to your reading. People, put your questions for Michael in the Q&A, which is coming up soon after our next reading. Thank you so much, Michael. Oh, sorry. I cut him off.
Cut him right off there.
I'm sorry, Michael. We will see. We will see him again. We will see him again, and I will not cut him off next time. I'm sorry. I was just too excited. It's been an amazing night. And we have one more amazing author to hear from, who is the winner of the Fairfield Book Prize. Victoria Buitron. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for having me tonight.
Yes, we are so excited to hear you read, and make sure you take your full 20 minutes. And but Chris is going to introduce you with your bio.
I certainly am. Victoria Buitron is a writer and translator who hails from Ecuador and resides in Connecticut. She received an MFA in creative writing from where else? Fairfield University. She writes about the intersection of identity and place, family history, and the moments her hippocampus refuses to forget. Her work has appeared or is forthcoming in Lost Balloon, X-Ray Lit Mag, Bending Genres, and other literary magazines. And of course, sometime around, I don't know, this time next year, I don't know when exactly the pub date is, we'll discuss that later, will come her prize-winning book.
Woo!
Thank you so much. I am so excited to read tonight.
Excited to have you.
Take it away.
All right. Thank you so much to Rebecca and Michael. You were excellent. I really can't wait to read your novels. So I have a memoir and essays. It's called A Body Across Two Hemispheres. So I've picked 3 short essays to read tonight. All that you need to know is basically what Chris said. I am a writer who hails from Ecuador, and now I reside in Connecticut. But when I was 15 years old, my family moved back to Ecuador. So all of the essays that I have for you tonight are based in Ecuador. Okay, so that's all you have to know for now. And this first essay is called How to Be an Ecuadorian Girl. You learn to replace peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, fries, and sloppy joes with decadent fruits. Mangoes first, because you don't have to leave the house to savor them, even though they wake you up with bangs on the sink roof in the middle of the night. You learn that zapote is your favorite, a plump sphere, brown lining on the outside filled with a bright orange gunk, succulent and sweet, which gets stuck to the spaces between your teeth. Guava is another treat you beg your uncle to bring when he comes home from work. It's a long and skinny enclosure in flexible green bark. The only edible part is the lining of the seeds inside, white, fuzzy, and savory. You learn when the vendor who sells ciruelas from a rickety cart usually stops by your street. They look like tiny mangoes, but taste nothing like them. At first, you're not sure how you like them, red and ripe or green and citrusy. You decide there is no point in choosing, because you will devour both. Your mother tells you that you must never forget this is not the yoni. Be careful with those short shorts, she says. But it's hot enough that spools of sweat form as soon as you get out of the shower, as you get out of bed, as you walk a few feet to the corner store. You learn that those shorts aren't just shorts. They will define you. The vecinos will whisper to each other. You will be the gringa slut who doesn't know that 15-year-old girls can't dress in shorts on the streets because men will acknowledge it. You wear jeans that stick to your legs like gooey face masks. It's hot, and taking them off feels like pulling tinfoil from leftovers. But you learn that shorts are a message to strangers, to relatives, to neighbors that your parents don't want you to send. You ask why you live in Ecuador but use currency from the United States. They tell you the shortened version. The economy collapsed a few years ago and the sucre, the currency used from the 1880s until 2000, became worthless. Ecuador adopted US dollars. Out of all the currencies in the world, somehow they chose that one instead of the neighboring sol from Peru or the peso from Colombia. A relief, because learning a conversion rate would have been annoying. All around you, people sell fruits, ice cream, and a taxi ride for just $1 or less. The bus from Milagro to Guayaquil is only 90 cents. Everywhere you hear dólar, dólar, dólar. You accept there is a different type of poverty in your hometown. There are fewer beggars than the ones at the highway exits back in Connecticut. But children, your brother's age, even younger, sell candy, cigarettes, and lollipops. Have they ever stepped inside a school? Who taught them how to add and subtract? Did they have to do conversion rates when they were 6 years old with their parents' help a few years ago? They walk behind their parents, or alone, in front of banks with lines of humans surrounding the block, hoping someone has a craving for gum. The pitch of their voices goes up so they sound younger than they actually are. At first, it shocks you that the corner store in your neighborhood are manned by kids younger than you. Then it becomes another facet of life in Milagro, in this small town where everyone works, even children. Some people in Ecuador, you learn, are filthy rich. An enclave of the rich separate themselves from the poor by a river and bridge. You pass by Duran, always in construction, where the gutters are open for weeks on end. It's a town on the side of the highway covered in a gray coating of concrete. Across the bridge, to the right is San Borondon, gated communities and men with guns at each entrance. The first time you visit, you think of Florida. Lines of palm trees, malls on each side, and a sudden rare gringo sighting, McDonald's. The first time you visit, you hear an accent you'd never heard before. It sounds like the tone of superiority. You'll learn this is called speaking with a potato in the mouth. Hablar con la papa en la boca. The accent of the rich. This is where you will go to school. You will traverse between your small town, about an hour away, cross Yahuachi, then Duran, and arrive in San Borondon because your padre promised your madre that history would not repeat itself. You have no idea what it means to be the other yet. You learn to incorporate phrases into your vocabulary. The first one that clicks is Pueblo Chico, Infierno Grande. Small town, big hell. One day, after you're done listening in on classrooms in Spanish at a local school in Milagro, you walk home with a friend. He has his left hand over your shoulders, and you walk side by side. He is not your boyfriend. You will never kiss him. You have no plans to do so. When you get home, your mom already knows who you were with at 3:37 p.m. Her uncle calls to let her know. Your mom tells him, so what? She knows he's your friend, but she still tells you. You see, this is what it means to live in a small town. There are no secrets. Your dad then tells you he has eyes everywhere and will always know your whereabouts. You shrug because you don't care, but the gringa in you is annoyed because everyone minded their own business in the yoni. The next phrase you learn is los trapos sucios se lavan en casa. Wash your dirty clothes at home. You realize this isn't completely true. They are washed at home, but people hang their trapos to dry because there are no drying machines. Washed panties are put on clothesline for everyone to see. Neighbors can't help but peek. The phrase is a lie your parents and ancestors made up to pretend they believe no one knows what goes on inside other people's houses. But everyone knows. You say hi, give the customary kiss on the cheek to someone your age you just meet. He leaves, and then someone tells you that the poor kid doesn't know the father that raised him isn't his biological father. They even know the name of his biological dad. How do you know his business, you ask? Vox populi, the person says. Voice of the people. Popular opinion. Gossip. You feel bad for the kid. His trapos are dirty and he doesn't even know it. You speak to other people who have been separated from their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers by an ocean or a tourist visa or by a residency petition that continues to avert them. That could have been you if you weren't partly a gringa, if your mom had not been born as what some deemed to be an anchor baby, if your father had arrived like many of his friends to the United States and overstayed their tourist visas. But you learn you are lucky because your 2 passports mean you've lived with your parents almost your whole life. You do not wait for Sunday to buy calling cards to speak to your mother for an hour. You don't wait for the father you haven't seen in 8 years to send you brand label clothing from Italy. You don't live with a slew of uncles and aunts. Your father is gone, but you know decades won't pass before you see him again. You do not pray for a visa to see a mother you haven't touched since you were 3 years old. You learn the privilege of a US passport. You see your skin for the first time. You learn the phrase mejorar la raza, better the race. It means whiten the race, but the people that say it avoid the words white and black. Girls and women want blonde hair. You learn that white skin is coveted. You are not white, and your hair is not straight. You learn to whiten the hairs on your arms with products you buy at the pharmacy. Lightening the hairs makes your skin look whiter. You've never felt ugly until now. The nickname of a girl just a shade darker than you, with the same color, hair, and texture, is Black. This is her nickname. You ask, but why? Everyone just tells you that she is, indeed, Black. Your gringa mind wonders why it's okay for someone's nickname to be this. She seems okay with it, happy even, but it makes you uncomfortable. You don't know it then, but this is just the beginning of learning about one of the remnants of colonialism, the adulation towards those who are white and blonde. The most intriguing phrase you learn is Domingo Siete. 7 Sundays, 7th Sunday, Sunday the 7th. You wonder how to translate this into English the first time you hear it. You think about God resting on the 7th day, but it turns out this phrase means unplanned pregnancy. God, Jesus, and the Virgin Mary. The 7th day. Your mom arrived with her 7th Sunday a month after she turned 18. A relative tells you someone said you would surely follow in the steps of your mother. You remind yourself to make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Sundays are not for church or silence. They are for visiting the graves of your abuelos, eating the raspados, shaved ice drenched in gooey condensed milk and flavors in a thick syrupy liquid outside of the cemetery. They are for eating on the concrete yard, watching the latest football game on television. You learn to live with dozens of relatives nearby. They live within a mile, 2 miles, 3 miles. You hear their voices through the wooden floors while you wake on Sunday mornings. Each weekend, your house is teeming with relatives, drinking beer, eating cangrejos, hosting a barbecue. In a family of 8 uncles, with 4 living close by, parties and reunions are the norm. On Sundays, you lay on the hammock and gossip with your cousins while the salsa music plays in the background from another corner of the yard. You hate conjugating verbs in Spanish, such as like, gustar. It makes your mind do leaps. Él me gusta, yo le gusto. At first, you can't differentiate between how to say I like him and he likes me. Somehow, gustar is an anomaly, and you have to conjugate it differently than other verbs. No one can explain why. The language is what it is. This was your first language, but it's not the language you've used outside of your house for the last decade. People make fun of your slight gringa accent. People laugh when you can't say a word correctly. People try to guess the word you can't remember. You still dream in English, but just as sluggishly as you learn to put diacritical marks on Spanish words, you increase the command of your first language in real life and in your dreams. You slowly embody a full-fledged Ecuatoriana, but she's still different from the girl you would have become if you had never left. Okay, so that was How to Be an Ecuadorian Girl. And the next up was a very, very short essay called Changes. Okay, when we leave everything in the United States and move back to the country I was born in, I don't think about the little things. Tiny lizards hissing at each other in the moments before sleep envelops me, to leap from my bed and shoo off crickets plastered on my window, slithering reptiles on my pillow. In just a few months, I sense when an iguana is on the roof. The strides heavy-footed, as if it'll fall through and land in my room at any moment. The feral cat's steps feel more like leaps, unless they're mating, and then all that can be heard are shrill screeches. These sounds, needing to live among these animals, won't cross my mind until it's happening. How the constant of a decade's silence in a distant place will prevent a good night of sleep. The buzz of mosquitoes loud enough to keep me up until first light. In the first weeks, their bites ooze on my skin, the scabs itchy long after they have taken what's needed. I learned to breathe under the covers, not allowing a spot of skin as bait. A pigeon makes a nest on the air conditioner sticking out of my mother's room. She doesn't want to disturb its peace, even when it wakes her up before the jarring alarm. But everything changes when she rouses one day covered in red blotches, and the trail of insects leads to the nest. She enlists the man who isn't afraid of walking on our roof, the one that throws rank mangoes from up high while I hold an old towel with an uncle. Sometimes the mango's skin is almost the color of tar, all rotten. The man takes home the just fallen ripe ones that manage to remain intact. The rest are removed to deter the pulp from cooking under the sun and prevent tiny holes from forming on the lines so rain doesn't stain our walls. His task on that day is to shoo the pigeon and destroy the nest, but he goes a step further. Our maid makes pigeon broth for dinner. Their air conditioners are sealed off at the top, so no other creature can make a home, so there's one less thing to interrupt our sleep. Look at that butterfly, I say. Moments after, I put on my pajamas, my mother making her way into my room. That's not a butterfly, she says. A moth, perhaps, but her rush tells me that I'm wrong about that assumption too. A man appears, but I don't remember who. Maybe an uncle or a man from outside of our gates. He uses a broom to snatch it from the wall, throws some cloth over it, and carries it to our yard for it to fly into the darkness beyond the trees. My mother holds my hand as we see the distinct wing spread, the pointy corners of its flap, and after I gasp, she tells me it's going to be fine. But I don't know if she's talking about them or us. I wonder what it says about me, confusing bats for butterflies. Okay, and now the last essay, which is called The First Test. I love this essay. I really hope that you enjoy it. Okay, here we go. I was a bilingual in a room full of monolinguals where they made a request to hear the sounds of unintelligible sentences in English that piqued their fancy. I loathe entertaining their boring request. If they told me to say tortuga, I said turtle. If they told me to say casa, I would say house. If they told me to say cucaracha, I lied to them and said the German word, crackerlacken. If they told me to say hijo de puta, I would say son of a bitch. And then I said, but that's the usual phrase for the term, when what you'll see on the captions in movies, but it's not all true because sometimes the soul of words, even the word puta, is lost. Puta means whore, bitch means perra, but no one says son of a whore in English. All of this I could explain, but when they asked me to say whatever I wanted, whatever came to my head, just to hear the peculiar sound of my accent, say whatever the mold of my tongue felt like flinging to their ready ears, my throat would grow jittery, my eyes would zigzag, my mind would flip the catalog of weird sentences that I could say. The house has a pig farm in the attic. I'm not a motherfucking parrot. I could be insulting your mother, grandmother, and your entire ancestral line, and you would never know. You're not even really damn interested in what I have to say, just my accent. Do you ever wonder what languages we would have, what customs we would practice if America was never colonized? These were the requests of my teenage classmates in Ecuador, in the country I was born in, but where I had not grown up, sitting in a class where I was learning Spanish, my first language that had been eclipsed by English when I moved for a decade to the United States. When they were bored, and this was often, the requests came. One day, there was a request from my teacher. She wanted to know the translation of the song title Skater Boy by Avril Lavigne, which is spelled SK8, the number 8, ER, and then BOI. Why was there an ocho in the first word? Scotcher boy, scotcher boy, scotcher boy? What does that mean? She asked. The students waited for my answer, their expectant stares waiting for a coherent explanation. The students but how to explain that the title only works in English? If I said that, they would have slapped their tongues to the roof of their mouths, rolled their eyes, and believed I was a fake. I wanted to say that title is lost on non-English speakers, and this is just how you have to live your life, not knowing why there's an ocho in the title. Sorry, your loss. Just like people all over the world had to come up in a foreign language what Michael Jackson meant when he said, beat it, just beat it. But I didn't want the profesora to think I was a pompous brat because she already thought I was a brat. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. You have to read the number 8 in English. 8 is number 8, not ocho. But even before that, you have to know that skater is actually a different way to write skater. That sound, the play on words, makes 8 sound like 8. I said all of this to a group of students sitting at their desks, tilting their heads, writing down notes as if this were to be on an upcoming test. No, skater with the number 8 isn't a real word. No, you won't find it in the dictionary. I said, boy neither, because it's a purposeful misspelling of the word boy. The writer was just playing with the sounds and not imagining that a bilingual Spanish speaker would have to get into phonetics to explain. Okay, the profesora said, now translate the entire song. Sure, miss. Can you let me sit down and go through the lyrics? Bueno, this will be your homework, she said. I went home and translated the lyrics line by line, hitting a roadblock when I came to the word punk. What was the equivalent to a skater punk when there wasn't a skate park in this entire town? How could I bring the essence of what a gringo punk meant to the Ecuatorianos in my classroom? And how could I explain to them that it was not the same as an old man finding a kid egging his house the day before Halloween and yelling, you little punk? I ravished my brain, completing the most difficult homework I had ever had, but felt a surge of pleasure each time I solved a term. How could I translate rock each other's world without making it sound sexual and getting reprimanded by the profesora? Or what term could I use without inserting the word rock, piedra, in Spanish? I hated the teacher. Each time a 5-letter word halted me for more time than I could bear. But it was on that day, after I reached the last line, sobre una chica que solías conocer, that I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Revive words on a page, conduct a dissection of their phonetic energy, feast on their syntactical order, and create a passage into another language where words would be built to invoke the same feeling to the reader or listener. I didn't know on that day if I would always be successful, but I knew I had to try. And most of all, I knew I would never spend so much brain power on a translation without getting paid for the mental energy that Avril Lavigne had drained out of me. I don't remember the teacher's name, but that homework sent me on a path that would define my life, a step beyond being bilingual and into the painstaking work of what it meant to become a translator. Thank you so much.
Oh my God. Powerful, vivid, incredible stuff. And just it grabbed my heart, and I was seeing everything and just, getting into this world with this girl. And just so incredible, Victoria. I mean, what a night, Chris.
Beautiful.
Wasn't it amazing?
Beautiful. So three such different stories, and every one of them could have won that damn prize.
Yeah.
I agree.
Great stuff.
Congratulations, Victoria.
Congratulations.
I can't wait to have this book in my hands as well.
Can't wait for you to read it.
Yes. Well, Victoria, absolutely amazing. Of course, you, like everyone else, needs to go on Facebook, YouTube later and see all of your comments. But we're going to bring Michael Belanger and Rebecca Dimyan up for our Q&A time. Let me just get our little Q&A banner. And, you know, I'm going to remove our logo so it's not on anybody's face here. Can we get another round of applause for our incredible finalists and readers for tonight? Oh my God.
Bravo, brava.
I am going to, oh wait, hold on. How do I remove the banner again? Okay.
God, I have no idea.
Oh wait, no, settings. Hold on. Okay, later. I got it. Oh no, I remember where.
Really.
Okay.
There it goes.
Anyhow.
Wow.
I mean, okay. You guys are all absolutely amazing. Your readings were incredible. And, you know, it's like an I'm not worthy moment. This is amazing. I would love to hear, we usually have a first question kind of related to like writing during quarantine, but I'm throwing out that question and I'm dying to ask all of you about your experience like submitting to the book prize and this particular, first of all, this manuscript. Tell me a little bit more about this manuscript and what was it like submitting, and we'll go Rebecca, Michael, Victoria.
Okay. All right. Well, so I was strongly encouraged to submit to this prize by Christopher Madden. He's read many drafts of this book. I've been working on it for 10, almost 11 years.
Awesome.
It's been a little while. I mean, I put it off to the side for a little bit and kind of keep coming back to it. And Chris has read quite a few versions. And he was like on me. He's like, just get it done and submit. You have a deadline now. I'm giving you a deadline.
Yeah.
You got to get it done. Just get it done and submit. I was like, okay. So I did. I buckled down. And I
Yes. Yes.
So, I think that was your question, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And you were, I think I remember you talking about this even back when I first met you at a residency about like 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah, that's when I started it because it was my thesis.
Oh, so amazing. So awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. It was so cool to hear from it tonight.
Thank you.
Michael.
So it was also a sort of a deadline for me because my son was going to be born. We knew, I think the due date was like December 17th. And I think the Fairfield Book Prize deadline was like
15th, I think.
Somewhere around there. And I was like, okay, this is the last thing I'm going to submit before fatherhood, because everyone was telling me there's going to be no time to write, no time to do anything. And so I just buckled down and I just revised until that day came in. And I kept worrying that selfishly that the baby was going to be born a week early or I wasn't going to submit. But luckily he was like a few days, he was like 5 days late. So I had plenty of time to submit.
Had a little bit more time. That is so great, Michael.
How accommodating of the young chap.
He's always supporting my writing.
I got you. That is so great. And Victoria.
For me, to be honest, I was this close to not submitting.
Oh no!
And I have to do a huge shout out to Madeleine DeLuca, who graduated with me, and she was like, "You need to send it," and I was like, "Okay, I'll do it just for you," but I don't think this is ready yet. And so it's huge shout out. If Madeleine wouldn't have convinced me, I think I would have been like, "Oh, I'm gonna wait till next time." So yeah. It's sometimes you just need a little nudge from a friend to be like, no, go do this.
I love that. Oh, I absolutely love that. Those are all like great submission stories. Just absolutely fantastic. Okay, I haven't even checked the chat. I'm so like totally excited here. Okay,
no, I
so
think people are stunned. They're stunned into not asking questions. I think they're intimidated.
Okay. Well, I have plenty of questions, Chris. So I'm dying. I'm dying to ask about each of these individual stories here. I have a quick question for you, Rebecca. These incredible characters and this scene in Beirut, is this based on personal experiences, people you've known, places you know, have you been to Beirut? How did you get into this story?
Great questions. So yes, so I've been to Beirut. I traveled to Lebanon back in, I believe it was 2016.
Awesome.
I went there and I did a bunch of research, and my dad and my dad's family, they're Lebanese, and and it was an amazing experience. And in the process of doing my research, I ended up finding like distant cousins that we didn't even know lived there, like in a random mountain village, a village called Abani, and it was just like the most unbelievable experience. So I tried to actually, anyone who would read the full manuscript would recognize some of those places they show up. But the book is primarily set in the early 1950s, so it involved a lot of research, a lot of family history. So my grandparents had a grocery store in Danbury, Connecticut, and so like there's a lot of that family history. So the book is fiction, but it is there's a lot of family history that kind of comes into play in both my research and the story itself. So the characters are shaped by those people, by my grandparents in particular.
Right. So that's why you said it. That's why you said it in the early 50s. It's because it's versus, the 80s,
any other era.
Because that's where your grandparents. That's when they were there. So you heard those stories and stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
So, that's so cool.
It plays that particular time period is important since the protagonist is dealing with his sexuality. Yeah. So that was not just for the time 1950s, but also being a Lebanese American man in the 1950s. So it's kind of a lot of layers there.
Yeah. Totally. Oh my goodness. You gotta I can't wait. I can't wait to have that in my hands. So it just needs to get, it just needs to get into a book and into my hands. It's so amazing. I want to ask you as well, Michael, going around here. I don't want to steal question time, but I'm already in it. Michael, I would like to ask you about these characters. So much humor here, so engaging. Another kind of we have this YA scene at the school, these fabulous characters. How did you decide to set it like this, and what inspired you to write this story with this lovely humor?
Definitely comes from real life. There's definitely elements of my life in there. Fred to me is like an amalgamation of every student in my life that has been difficult to love, but also it's to me also partly like our own writer's critic, like that own voice inside our head, kind of always taking us down a notch. And so to me, Fred plays that role throughout the novel, and the question is, what do you do with that voice? And Walt asks, what do you do with Fred? So that to me was the inspiration behind Fred. And then Walt, it's like, writers, we have these two impulses. We are, we have to be of the world. We have to be observers. We have to, be fully engaged with the world, but we're also in our own heads all the time, right? Yeah. So we're always struggling with these two kind of identities. And Walt to me is like the hyped up version of a in your head writer, a narcissistic writer. And so I put like the worst impulses of teaching and writing into Walt. So there's some fun scenes that happen.
Yes. I love it, and I can't wait to read the rest of it.
Fred is like the personification of that nagging voice that we all hear. It's a kind of a nightmare, in a way. It's like it's like you meet this person who's just gonna needle you. Hundreds of pages. That's awful.
A few aspects of the humor are reminded me of Shriver, Chris, like in some ways. Right? Yeah. We got some Shriver-y humor in there. That's so great. Very, very, very funny. Very fun. Victoria, completing the circle, and then Marina has a question down here, but I have to ask you. So we're talking about inspiration and characters here. You've given us like this incredible picture in the space of about 20 minutes of like what it is like for like being a young woman coming from the United States, being bilingual, bicultural, but like having this struggle of like feeling like a stranger in this country that is part of you, and getting to know it. It's so powerful and so overwhelming, but also it's like a gift because you're able to describe that experience so beautifully and so powerfully. Just tell us more about the inspiration here and how these beautiful essays happened.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, it was long.
How it all happened. Well, I have a lot of flash pieces. So there's like a lot of long form essays, and then interspersed there are a lot of flash pieces too. So I would have to say that, even before coming into the program, I looked up all of these teachers that are like truly inspiration to me, and I jumped on being part of Brevity. And that allowed me so much to put a lot of these experiences into flash form, because I love flash. I love like the flexibility and how versatile it is and all that you can do with flash. So I feel like if it wouldn't have been for this MFA program, I maybe wouldn't have had so many flash pieces as I do. And I would just have to say that so many of the workshops and my mentors throughout the program just really, really allowed me to shape this manuscript.
That is so awesome, Victoria. That is so great.
Question. The first essay.
Yes.
How did you land on the second person? How to be formatted. It's so effective.
I have a lot of, I really tried to experiment as much as I could. So I have a few essays that are in the second person. I have a lot of essays that are in the list form, abecedarians, some that have just really, I think I've only seen it like a couple of times. It's this essay where I use the word, in English, you only have the word love, it's just the word love, but in Spanish, you have 3. So what I did is I created a space where you can insert one of the 3 words. So I really tried to experiment as much as I could, just because it's so much fun. And I feel like it's something different, and I just love experimenting. I love flash, I love micros, all of that.
That's so cool.
That is so cool. I can't wait to read and or hear those as well. Well, we have a question that just came in here for Victoria. It says, how did you decide which essays to include in your memoir, and in what order? Was it more instinctual, or was there a strategy to it?
Oh my gosh, it was not instinctual at all. I remember that I started out with this scene of me arriving to the United States in the airport. That's how I was I'm going to start this chronologically. And in my last semester, I was like, this is not working. This is terrible. I can't do this. And then I was like, you know what? My life is all over the place. So I'm just going to have, I'm going to make it a memoir and essays, so that if you want to, if you want to go and read an essay in the last half. You don't necessarily have to have read the first half. So you can read it like in order, or you cannot. And so it's actually divided by 3 sections. It's called the Southern Hemisphere, then Between Borders, and then the Northern Hemisphere.
I love it.
And thank you for that question. That's an excellent question.
That's an awesome question.
I mean, that applies.
Marina asked that question. I just saw it at the bottom.
That applies to, you know, story collections, poetry collections, right? It's like, you know,
oh yes.
How do you? It's so hard to know what goes where.
So hard.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And how you like shape that experience. If someone does read it, you know, cover to cover, you know, consecutively, or whether they're just jumping into the middle, I think what you just described with that variety of forms and kind of these different sections is just so fascinating. You can experience the book so many different ways. Awesome.
Thank you.
We have another question for Victoria here, and then Chris, I feel like we're going to have to do our last question. Oh, sometimes Chris and I click the button at the same time. I feel like a dueling. Okay, Chris, why don't you go ahead and read that?
All right, this comes from Angelica. Victoria, do you feel you know yourself better now after deeply thinking about your culture, and which do you consider your home culture?
I think culture, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Fast.
I think that knowing yourself is a lifelong exploration. I think that that's why there's so many people that inspire me that have tons of memoirs. Well, not tons, but you know, that write 3-4 different memoirs about different aspects of their life. And this was definitely just like one very specific thing that happened to me, that I was like, I really need to take this and make it into art. And which do I consider my home culture? Oh my gosh, I don't know. Like when it comes to soccer, I'm always like, you know what? I'm always rooting for Ecuador. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then in other aspects, I'm like, then I'm like, oh, you know, I chose at the end of the day to live here in Connecticut, at least for now. But I would like to say that, you know, both are home in very different ways.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be who I am without, you know, having learned 2 languages and without having lived in both of the locations.
Awesome.
Thank you for the question.
That's an awesome question. We have another one in the bottom here. Chris, what do you do? I want to, you know what? Okay. Well, you know what? I feel like this is a question we could ask everybody. Maybe starting with Victoria, if we put this up here.
Yeah.
It says, okay, so this is from Carolina Bell. She says, where do you see your book taking you creatively, and what would you like to explore writing next after creating this? So we'll start with you, Victoria, and then
oh my God, can you come back to me?
All right, we'll let you. We'll finish with you on this one, and then I think we have to go to our famous last question. But okay, so Rebecca, are you ready for these double question here?
That's a good. Oh, these are tough ones.
So where do you see this manuscript taking you creatively? I mean, we need it. It will be published. It will be published. Maybe not a prize, but it will be.
Thank you. I mean, it's taking me out of my comfort zone, for sure. It pushes me to think about stories and write about stories that I wouldn't necessarily, feel comfortable doing. So, which I like, though. It's a challenge. It's probably why it's taken me 10 years. And then in terms of what I'd like to explore writing next. So I actually have another manuscript that I am currently finishing, nonfiction, more of a memoir, that's writing. I do a lot of writing about my experience with chronic illness and some of the holistic treatments that I've encountered. So I've written about those experiences. So I'm kind of working on that project currently as well.
Nice. Rebecca, looking forward to all of that. That's great.
Thank you.
And Michael?
One thing I really enjoyed about writing this book was, capturing the life of a writer. And I know that that's a well-worn path in fiction where your main character is a writer. But one thing I really enjoyed about this book is part of the book is him finding his way out of his writer's block. So he has excerpts of the novel he's working on. And I really like that idea of putting the writer inside the book. And so I kind of took that and I'm working on finishing a young adult novel that has that same premise, except he's writing a murder mystery as he's solving a crime. So
that's awesome. That is so cool, Mike.
Yeah.
It is so cool.
That sounds awesome.
Just amazing stuff. Yeah.
So where do I see this book taking me creatively? Oh my gosh, like my only dream is for an Ecuadorian girl to reach out to me and say, you know what, you've written about things that I've never seen before. And because when I was young and I lived here in Norwalk, Connecticut, but I would read a lot of books by Dominican Americans and Mexican Americans and Puerto Rican Americans, but I've never really read a memoir by an Ecuadorian writer. So I felt like, I wrote something that young people needed. That would be, if that's where it takes me creatively, I would be so happy. And what would I like to explore next? There was a shift this year that I never thought would ever happen, but I began writing fiction. So that isn't something that I never thought would have happened. And so it just sounds very weird to say that I'm also now a fiction writer. So I want to say that I have no idea yet, but maybe it'll take me somewhere.
Amazing. She's becoming a double threat. Just watch. You're going to start writing poetry and then you'll be a triple.
You heard it here first.
Like Baron. And so many of our writers on here who are doing everything. Oh, incredible. So cool. Well, before it gets, we're a little bit later than normal, but that is no problem because this is an amazing night and we want to make sure we hear from all of you. But we have a famous last question that we just must ask the finalists, Chris.
So true. And that question goes thusly. Okay. Part 1. Pearl of wisdom for young, emerging, up-and-coming writers.
Yes.
The first thing that pops into your head, what little piece of advice that you would give them? Part 2, a book recommendation for our many viewers out there. Something that's you've read recently, or maybe you read a million years ago that you love and want to talk about. So, Rebecca, Pearl of Wisdom. First.
The first thing that pops into my head would probably be just keep writing. That just keep it simple, keep writing always, even through rejection, through whatever, just keep doing it.
Yes.
I think that would be that. And then for a book recommendation, that's hard to pick just one. I can't
pick 2.
You can rattle off a few if you want. It is hard.
It's can I say Shriver?
Maybe we'll do girls and then recommendations.
No, you can't say Shriver. No, that doesn't.
You can, Chris. It's an amazing book.
Yeah, let's go with Shriver. I love Shriver. It's one of my favorites.
Hell yeah. Chris is blushing over it. He's blushing.
We're brown nosing.
Yeah, Chris. Yeah, Chris.
All right, Rebecca, the check's in the mail.
All right. Michael, your pearl of wisdom and recommendation.
I think for me, and a theme of tonight is to write what you know, and don't be afraid to explore your own experience, your family's experience, your life, your job, whatever it is. I think I've gotten a lot of, it's given me solace as a writer to not feel like I'm always being taken away from the page, but that what I do in my life can actually add to the page. And the book I would recommend is another writer who loves to capture the writer's journey, which is Anthony Horowitz, who writes this great murder mystery series called The Word. The first one's called The Word is Murder, and it's about him with a fictional detective. Like he's the Watson, and he has this like kind of grizzled Holmes, and they solve crimes together. So
that's so
that would
great.
be my recommendation.
Cool.
So cool. Thank you, Mike and Victoria.
So there is something that Susan Wadi-Daraj, she once started a workshop saying that we should all have our own schedule, like our own schedule and time for writing, which I'd never done before because I'd always been like, oh, I write whenever I can. But having set up a schedule of when, if it's 2 hours on a Saturday morning, or wake up at, or if you're a night owl at night on Saturdays, I feel like ever since I created my own schedule that it really helps me a lot, even if it's just journaling, and then something comes from there. So I would recommend just making your own little schedule and telling your your partners or your family that you live with, I'm not available during that time because this is my writing time. So that, and I definitely have to shout out another Ecuadorian writer. I recently, the great thing about this is that this book is available both in English and in Spanish. So in Spanish, it's called Pelea de Gallos, and in English, it's called Cockfight, and it's by Maria Fernanda Ampuero. So in English, it was translated and it's available through Feminist Press. It's a kind of like horror. Horror is very like heavy and dark, but I love heavy and dark. And if you go and look that up, it's about Ecuador. It's about Guayaquil, about things that happen there. And whenever I can shout out other Ecuadorian writers, I definitely check.
Yes. Absolutely. Victoria, awesome pearl of wisdom there. Get it on the schedule, and such a cool book that we have to check out. And we have to finish up for tonight, but we just need to give another congratulations and round of applause to our finalists. FAIRFIELD Book Prize. They're not ours, but they're you're
Well, they basically are.
You're our friends.
Congratulations, Victoria, on winning the prize.
Thank you.
Congratulations, you guys, for being finalists. And I just want to, my little pearl of wisdom here, because you brought up Schreiber. Schreiber was submitted for the first FAIRFIELD Book Prize, and not only did it not win, it wasn't even a finalist. And this was back when there weren't that many MFA people even, in terms of competition. So that pearl of wisdom is your book is still alive. And don't set it aside because you didn't win this particular prize. Get it out there, right? Because
I need all of these books. I need all of them.
We want to read them.
The audience needs all of them. You got to read these comments, people.
But these books have legs, and get them out there. And Victoria, when is your
matter of time?
When is it scheduled to come out?
Spring 2022, so next year.
It'll be here before you know it.
Yeah.
Can't wait for it. And, send people this reading. Be like, look, I got this amazing manuscript out there. All right. Thank you so much to our audience. Thank you, finalists. Thank you, Chris. It's been a great night. Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Don't forget, we're off next week and the following week.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget.
So, don't forget us. Like I said, we'll see you in 3 weeks.
See you